I feel like you're the one that normally gets really aggravated. I feel like you're like cool as a cucumber, whereas I'm sitting here being like, I'm about to fucking punch my fucking computer screen because it's giving me the
Nah,
shits.
nah, I'm just rolling with it, man. It is
You
what it is.
you can roll away, my good friend. I'm going to
Get
just
aggravated.
I'm just gonna fucking I'm gonna seethe here in my own disdain.
And welcome back to Bars Loaded Podcast with Ben and Nick.
Are you unwell or
Yeah, I am.
yeah? Well, mate, I mean, fuck. Like for one, it's very rare that I'm on the synthetics
I
versus
love
like an
that.
actual coffee. Well, I like these, but they make me need to piss like something chronic,
Oh yeah,
which is
that's
generally why I'm like, I'll pass. But like, I mean, I've already had my stovetop holds like 4 shots of coffee, and I know I had about 3 in it when I had that one earlier, and then I've had 2 filter coffees as well. So I'm like, I've had a decent-ish amount of caffeine today. Like nothing where I'd be like, oh my god, like I'm tasting color. But
yeah. But you're
yeah,
caffeinated.
yeah, I don't feel caffeinated.
No, it's because you're tired.
Yeah.
I'm under I'm under caffeinated, but I've had the worst. I think it's sinus.
Mm.
That's what I think it is, and it comes and goes. So like at the moment, I feel okay. But this morning, like inside my nose and my eyeballs were so itchy, like uncontrollably itchy to where it was like, extremely uncomfortable, and there's nothing that I could do to stop it. And then, like, it'll just all of the sudden go away, and it won't come back until the next day, and then I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, like, my nose will just start itching, and it'll stay for like 3 hours.
It's weird.
Oh, it's horrible. And my eyes water and they get red. But I don't know if you
You sure it's
noticed,
not hay fever?
it could be like a hay fever thing or a sinus thing, but I've never had that before in my life. So I don't know. Is that something that just starts randomly one day?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, because I've never ever had that before. That's why I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't usually get hay fever, but I don't know. What podcast did we do recently? Oh, it was one of them that we did recently. It might have been, it might have been the, might have been the one with. Honestly, I don't know. It's one of them. You'll see it
Mm.
when it comes out if you see the little shorts that come out on Instagram. But my eyes look like I've smoked like 16 billies like 15 seconds before I came on air. They're so red. It's because they were falling out of my head.
Nick, it's okay. Like you're allowed to cry.
Dude, I don't
Like
cry.
this is a safe space. You know, we're all for men expressing their emotions and having a cry when it's necessary. Like you don't need to try and cover it up with smoking billies, as the kids say these days.
You're all for men expressing their feelings.
Fucking
let's
oath, I
clar-
am.
let's clarify that. I am a big advocate of just shoving that shit deep and
And
just
that
letting
is
it
what leads to a
fester.
heart attack when you're in your 40s.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of just getting it stuffed down there as deep as it can go.
Yeah, no, that's not me. I'm the opposite. I'm like, talk that shit out.
How many times since I've known you have I been like, dude, I've got a problem I need to talk about?
More often than I thought you would have, which I'm honestly very proud of.
It's more ranting, but like, there's never been anything where I'm like, I'm like really upset about this. I feel
Mm,
like crying.
mm,
I don't know. It's just not a feeling that I have very often.
mm.
It's not actively that I try not to. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's the autism. I don't know. I feel like that's an emotion, and I feel like I'm far too logical for emotion to ever override any of the logic. Like I have this discussion with Em all the time. She's like, I don't need a solution. I just need you to listen and tell me that it's going to be okay. I'm like, well,
Mm.
obviously it's going to be okay. I just gave you 3 solutions.
Oh, lordy.
She's like, no, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen and tell me that it's going to be okay. I'm like, yeah, it
I feel like
is.
I feel like the inherent like masculine response is like, "Oh, we have a problem. Like, I'll give you a fucking solution for it." But then it's
I don't
like,
know that it's. I don't know that it's masculine. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's masculine in the fact that men are typically more logical,
yeah,
and women are typically more emotional. So like the logical response then gets kind of labeled as the masculine response.
mm,
I don't think that providing solutions is like inherently like super masculine, but I think it is very logical. Like, you have an issue, I have a solution, no
mm.
more issue.
And then you can throw in the Austin Powers responsibility, like, "Oh, you got an issue? Here's a tissue."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then you'll get fucking slapped, and she'll be like, "Nick, you're sleeping on the couch tonight."
Yeah, but it's like, well, if you have an issue and I have a solution, I feel like you should be praising me here because now there's no reason to be emotional. I've just cured all of your woes.
I'm sure that would be received as intended.
It never is, which is really fucking surprising to me.
I'm sure.
The conversation usually ends up in me being extremely confused
Yeah.
because then I'm like, because then I try and logic the like not wanting logic, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't want a solution? Like, you have a problem. What do you want to do? Just like sit in your problem? Like, I've given you a solution. Why am I the bad guy here? And she's like, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen. And I'm like, I am listening. I listened, I processed, I found a solution. I gave you the solution all within 2 seconds. I'm a genius. Praise me, damn it. Praise me. Surprisingly, that's generally not what happens.
No. She's like, "No, Nick." I said, "Oh God, not you're a god."
Yeah. So usually when she's like, oh God, I'm like, yes. She's like, oh, no. So now I generally ask, would you like a solution or would you like me just to listen?
That is the most diplomatic response, I believe.
Yeah. And then what I generally do is the answer is always, I just want you to listen. So I listen. And then I come into my office and I write down the solution in my notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And then I leave the piece of paper on her desk for the next morning so that when she goes into her office the next morning, the solution is there for her, that she can implement it whether she wants to or not. Um, so then we all win.
Fantastic.
Yeah. That's what I've found really works. And welcome to marriage.
Yeah, nice. Marriage 101 with Nick and M.
Speaking of, you went for a nice bush trek on the weekend.
Did. So we had a basketball game out in a little country town called Shepparton, which for me is about 3-ish hours away. From Megan, it's about hour and 45, hour and 50, somewhere thereabouts. And then we ended up going, so we went to that game, which is good. We smashed them,
Hell
which was
yeah. Your
so
team's
it was
going good.
like they're going really well. So we're currently second on the ladder. The team that we were playing is, I think, 7th out of like 13. And I think at the end of the first quarter, it was like 24-22. So we're like, fuck, like this could be a close game. Like they have the one thing that they do really well is their community and their atmosphere is outrageously good. Like they advertise on like the Coates Hire signs, like, oh, Shep basketball 7 p.m. on Saturday night, like be there, and they literally have the entire stadium full.
Oh, nice. So it's a good atmosphere.
They have a phenomenal community up there for basketball. So like obviously they're making heaps of noise, being like, oh, we're sitting seventh on the ladder. We're playing the team that's second, and it's a 2-point game. Like that just shows you how good basketball we play. Rah 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 rah.
Yeah,
And then,
dude. To be honest, obviously, everyone knows I spent a fair bit of time over in the States, and
mm,
while I was over there, me being me, going to sporting
mm-hmm,
events was a very big part of my life. So I've been to a ton of NFL games, a ton of Major League Baseball games, San Jose hockey games, and Golden State and Sacramento basketball games.
mm-hmm,
Um, the basketball games are the best, man. And like
mm,
NFL games are great, don't get me wrong, just because I love the NFL, but the atmosphere at a basketball game is unrivaled.
yeah,
They have the DJ there, they have the announcer there that's just hyping the game up. They've got the music, the lights. It's an event within a game of basketball.
mm,
It's unmatched, man. And because it's in that inside arena too, like it's so much louder than anything else.
yeah, really
It's so
loud.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
same. Um, so yeah, like we ended up winning by like 31 points. But like at the end, there was a few moments when like they had all like the kids and stuff from like their junior clubs and stuff that were there watching, and they're just being like really loud. So anytime we would take a free throw, like the entire stadium just erupted in noise to try and distract them. And then like we would make a basket, and I would just be like, and just be like obnoxiously like looking at them and clapping, being like, yeah, yeah, fuck you
Yeah.
guys. But like, yeah, we just ended up getting a bit of a solid lead by about halftime. I think we were up by, I don't know, it was like 12, 15 at halftime, whatever it was, maybe 20. And then we just kind of kept like building out the lead. They would score a basket, still be like 25 points down. The crowd would go fucking wild. And we're all like, relax, you're losing.
Are they a local team as well, or
Locally in what way?
so were you playing at their?
Their home.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
So
all the
like
crowd was very biased towards them.
we had two people supporting our team in the stand.
Nice.
And that was like Megan, and then I think it was like the coach's friend that came up to watch as well. But like the team hired like a van, and they all drove up as a team.
Yeah.
Like the coach, some of the coaches stayed overnight. They were gonna like they offered us a room, but I was like, oh look, we're not gonna stay in Shep. So we ended up like we got in the car at I think it was like 8:45 maybe. And we didn't get into Dalesford until like 11:15, 11:20
Was that Friday night?
Saturday night.
Saturday night. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Wow, dude,
and
that's late. That's
yeah,
late for you.
oh, dude,
That's
it's
late for
very
you
late for me.
because
Yeah,
you're a sleepy bear.
yeah. So then like we woke up Saturday morning at like 8 o'clock, which again is like a late sleep in for me. And then we like went down the street, grabbed some coffee, grabbed some food, went and visited Megan's mum at the markets down there, and that's when we went and had a little bit of a frolic in the forest afterwards, which was really good.
Mm,
Yeah,
cool.
like it was like it was
Freezing, actually.
yeah it was cold.
Yeah.
So like when we got in on the Saturday night, it was like 1 degree when we got in, and then on Sunday morning, I think it was like 7 degrees or something like that. But it was just like a really shitty drizzle. It wasn't raining, but it wasn't not wet.
Yeah, it's like that sleeting kind of rain. So that's Seattle rain, dude. That's Seattle like 10 months a year.
Yeah, fuck that.
That temperature or colder and that type of rain every single day, non-stop, 10 months a year. That's Seattle. It's like I think there's statistics saying it's the wettest kind of city on earth.
It doesn't surprise me.
It's just that, but it's not really heavy rain a lot of the time. It's just like the photos that you put up, like that sleeting
Mm.
rain that's just like annoying enough that you have to wear rain gear,
Yeah,
but it's not hard enough that stops you going outside.
Yeah. But no, we ended up going to like a pine plantation. And it was just beautiful. Like we both absolutely fucking froth pine trees.
It's
Like
such a weird thing to froth.
yeah, like
Like,
honestly, for me, it's like
I love pine trees.
I think like just like aesthetically, they just look really really nice.
They do. I mean,
And
they
then
look
obviously,
cool, but I would never say I froth them. Like this, it's
oh, dude, like they look nice, they smell nice. Like there's a lot to like about them.
Do
um,
you have you have you ever come across the pine tree scented beard oil?
yes.
Dude, you should get some of that. You'd constantly just be frothing yourself, always.
What makes you think I don't already?
Ah, true. But you could elevate.
Hmm.
You could elevate the froth.
I'll be frothing from the broom. But no, so like we ended up going for a bit of a walk in the forest. We went, mushroom hunting again.
Mm-hmm. Did you take
Um,
any photos and put it on the Facebook group? Dude, you guys
mm,
might be even just getting famous within that community with the amount of shrooms you're hunting. Like, you
oh,
might get
dude,
a name for yourself.
the people in those communities, they have a fucking name for themselves.
Oh, there's like
There's people
the,
that are like,
there's like the guy in the mushroom community that's like, oh, he's that guy.
yeah, he's
The
the fun guy.
fun guy, the big man on campus, the big man on the mushroom campus.
That was a joke.
Oh, the fun guy. I get it
Yeah,
because mushrooms. Yeah, okay, I
yeah,
got it. I say
yeah.
fungi. That's why I didn't get it. Anyway,
Apparently, it's
is it
actually
is it fungi?
apparently it's pronounced fungi.
Like, but well, no, it's not because bungee isn't spelled that way. Bungee is
No,
spelled B
so
U N G E
there's
Y.
a guy called Paul Stamets who's
Well,
like a world leading expert on like mushrooms, and he's like, yeah, it's pronounced fungi or something like that. It's weird.
I could say, well, Benji is spelled BENJI. So
Mm,
fungi could be right, I guess.
mm,
Sounds weird.
yeah,
I'm not
I
down
just
with
say
that.
fungi.
I'm gonna keep saying. Well, I don't really ever say it to be honest.
Mm.
Can't
But like
remember the last time I said it.
fungi would also make sense because like if you wear a gi in like jiu-jitsu, that's like GI, got like a gi,
A ghee,
fun
yeah.
gi,
But then there's also ghee that you eat, which is
GH.
GHEE.
Yeah, it's the English language is fucked.
Yeah.
But no, it was
Why are we like this?
like
Who invented our language?
some
It wasn't one
fucking.
person for sure. It was a bunch of people, and they couldn't agree on it. And they're like, "Fuck it, you know what? Let's just have all of it."
So I miss the days when we were just like grunts and like
That's how I communicate.
yeah, I know. It's because you're like a human ogre.
I used to be, not anymore, dude. Oh, speaking of, I went into the gym into Hunter Strength the other day to coach clients,
Mm.
and just to save myself a trip in the opposite direction in the day. I went in an hour early and trained at
Hmm.
Hunter Strength. It was a day that I didn't need like plyo boxes or balls or anything, so everything that I needed they had there, so it was fine.
Hmm.
But on the wall of the gym, they have a photo that we took of the team from the gym, that everyone that competed at GPC Nationals last year
Hmm.
took a photo together, and then we got it blown up into a big banner, and it's hanging up in the wall. Dude, I haven't really looked at it for a long time because whenever I'm there, I'm just coaching clients and I'm in and out. But when I was training there, I was sitting right in front of it doing dumbbell presses. So in between, I looked up, I was like, "Holy fuck, who is that person?" I
Mm.
don't look anything like that anymore.
No, you really
My
don't.
my face was round as fuck and
Hmm.
puffy, and my eyes, like under my eyes, were just like puffy and wrinkly and baggy, and My beard was almost down to my nipples.
Yeah, it was.
Dude, I look like a completely different person.
No shit. You pretty much were.
Yeah, but it's when it's you and you see
Mm.
yourself every single day, you don't really realize. Like I don't. When I look at myself, I still think I'm that guy. So to see that guy like staring back at me, I was like, "Holy fuck, that looks like me." Not at all. Not even a little bit. It was such a trip.
Bit of a pretty impressive transformation you've had, though.
I was thick, but
Yeah, no. You were what, like 25 kilos heavier?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, nearly 30.
Mm.
I mean,
That's
it's a
not an
lot of weight.
insignificant amount of weight.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight for
Mm.
sure. So it was actually just super wild to see.
Yeah.
For definitely, it made me a little bit upset for a second.
In what way?
Well, just because my initial reaction was like, "Oh fuck!" Like that took me so long and so much hard work and so much dedication and so much effort, both in just like shoveling food in when I didn't feel like it, training so hard when I didn't feel like it, just never missing a session, never taking a set, any easier than it needed to be. Everything was switched on every single day, every single waking moment
Mm-hmm.
was built around getting as big and strong as possible. And so when I initially looked at it, I was like, fuck, that took so much time and hard work to build that, and it's gone.
Mm.
That was a little upsetting and a little shocking. Gone in the sense that, like, obviously I'm not that strong anymore and I'm not that big anymore. And they're the two things that were my primary focus for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
So to see it staring back at me was a bit of a shock.
Understandably so.
But then it quickly turned to, like, I quickly was like, fuck, I feel so much better. I'm actually not that much weaker. I'm
Mm.
definitely weaker, but it's not as significant as what you would think. Strength is definitely, like, I'm still way stronger than I need to be for my current focus.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is to definitely not get any stronger. That's not what I'm trying to do at the moment. If anything, I'm going to get weaker in the absolute strength column than I am now, because I'm still far too strong for what I need to be.
Yeah.
Um, and I can focus that energy on building the other qualities. But it's like it was just a slap in the face. But I feel so much better. So I quickly was able to realize, like, fuck, like I feel so much better. I can actually sleep now without waking up gasping for air. My blood pressure's perfect. I can touch my toes. I can do my shoelaces up. I can go to breakfast and walk from the car to the table and not have to take 10 minutes before I order my coffee to catch my breath back. Like, all of these things that seem like everyday people could do, I couldn't do any of those things.
Mm. It's always really interesting as well. Like, there are obviously like some pretty non-generalized points of progression. Like, you know, I don't know about the populations that you work with, but I know over the last 13 years or so, while I have been coaching, I've literally had some people that couldn't walk 30 meters without being out of breath.
Hmm.
And most people don't really think of that as like a point of comparison, a point of progress. It's like purely just around like, oh, well, how much weight have I lifted and how much weight have I lost? Whereas like there is generally some points of progress that we can measure where it can literally be something as simple as like, can you walk from the car to the breakfast table to enjoy breakfast with your partner and not need 10 minutes between sitting down and ordering because you don't need to catch your breath? I think those are sometimes some pretty valuable points to track. Like I know for me, like I've gone through a period of time when, my stress has been like a little bit higher than obviously I would ideally like, and my blood pressure has been up at ranges I don't really like it to be at. And then it's like, oh well, I go off when I do A, B, and C. That brings those points down from where I don't want them to be down to where they do want to be. And it's like, oh, I do this, and now my head doesn't hurt for fucking hours afterwards. Like I think sometimes those points often get overlooked.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's the same. It's all things are trackable, right?
Mm.
So if your sport isn't the gym, so everyone on the planet, other than powerlifters and strongmen and Olympic weightlifters and
Mm-hmm.
CrossFitters, so everyone on the planet other than those four people, those four groups of people, the gym is there to, and lifting weights and strength training is there to enhance the other areas of your life, whether that be a Gen Pop client or a general population client who is strength training and using strength and conditioning to improve their daily life or the quality of their life outside of the gym, walk better, move better, lift things off the top shelf, play with their kids, sit at their work desk and not get a headache. All of these things are trackable metrics because that's actually the shit that matters. How much
Mm-hmm.
weight is on the bar for those people is quite literally irrelevant. It's just a stimulus to create an adaptation to make the thing that actually matters, which is life outside the gym, better. Any other athlete that isn't those four athletes I previously mentioned, it's the exact same thing.
Mm.
What happens in their sport is what actually matters, and that's the things that really should be tracked. And it's like the gym stuff and the S&C stuff. It's like if you're doing this and this is getting better, but you're not actually getting better at your sport, like maybe this is wrong.
Mm.
Like maybe we need to be doing something different here that gets a different result over here and makes you actually better at the sport. Are you getting faster? Are you jumping higher? Are you playing more minutes? Are you know, playing more games throughout the season and not missing it through injury? All of these things that are trackable metrics that aren't weight on the bar necessarily that mean more than what's on the bar.
Yeah. It's always really interesting as well. Like, obviously we've been doing what we've been doing for some time now. And you get some people that will literally come in and go, well, the only metric that I have to really work off is, am I stronger? How much weight have I lost? Whatever it might be. Whereas you and I can sit there and be like, oh, well, there's so many banners in which progress comes under. It's just a matter of like, well, what's actually relative to someone's like individual circumstances. Again, like obviously talking about populations outside of those four that you mentioned, it's like, we've got you that works with rugby, me that works with basketball. Like, yes, we have, improvements in the athletic sort of realm that we're looking to improve upon.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's like the primary objective that we have is like, are they better athletes so they can perform better at their sports? Like at the
Yeah,
end of the day, like whether someone that I'm working with has a 40 kilo squat or a 200 kilo squat, like I don't give a fuck.
it doesn't
It's
matter.
really not that important.
No, it's nice to see progress for us because that's how we're wired. We're the strength coach.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like if they're squatting 200 kilos and they're a worse player, like see ya, Ben, you're not coming back next year.
Yeah.
The goal
Like,
is for them to be a better player.
yeah. And I think like
So,
that was one thing that like was quite nice for me is on Saturday night, like after the win, we were talking to like the other person that was up there supporting our team, and he said to like our head coach, he's like, oh, like your guys did a really good job at holding a higher level of like conditioning and being able to just run longer and faster than the other team could. And
mhm.
that's thankfully where like the head coach literally goes, well, we've got like Ben to help with that because obviously like he's here as our S&C coach. Like he's done a great job with the boys so far. And it's always like really interesting. Like we had a guy join our club a couple of weeks ago, and like he's played pretty high level as a lot of the guys in the team have, but like he's played like full stadiums kind of thing. Like it was pretty impressive, like the level he's played at. And he even said to me, he goes, I feel like we need X, Y, and Z as part of our warm up drills. So there's a bit of a bridge between what we're currently doing and what we then end up doing in training. I was like, cool, that's great. Like I'll pass that on to like the more sort of like upper coaching stuff and see if there's time for me to be able to weave that into what we're doing. And they're like, yep, that'd be fantastic if you could. So then like we had it like included in our training on Thursday, and he literally came up to me at the end of it and he goes, mate, thank you so much for adding that in. Like there are, sometimes where people go, oh, well, like what I've written is the best, rah, rah, rah. I said, well, mate, like I don't give a fuck what I could give you guys. Like if it's not what you guys need to get you ready for what we're trying to do, then it needs to change. And like, so like I appreciate the feedback that I get from you, but I think it's really nice as well to, be in positions where you get feedback, you can implement feedback, and then you get feedback from like the other end of it as well to be like, oh, well, our guys are doing well because we have someone here helping them and he's doing a good job. So I think like, especially within like team environments, like it's quite nice to have like recognition of that. Like obviously we were saying like, there would be no point whatsoever in me getting these guys to a point where they're squatting 200 kilos if they were slower, worse basketballers. Like, at the end of the day, like if it meant that they didn't lift any weights and we just did a lot of conditioning, it's like, oh, well, no, they're better basketballs because they can do more skill work in training and they can recover from it. It's like, well, cool. Like that might be, relevant. But I think at the end of the day, you and I also have enough sort of like self-awareness and not as much of as an ego issue as we may have had once upon a time, where we don't really have to go, well, no, well, I'm a strength coach, so my job is just to get these boys stronger. It's like, well, if we look at technically the title of our role, it's strength and conditioning coach. So I think playing into both of those roles is like they need relative strength, but they also need relative conditioning. And if they don't have a balance between the two, then they're going to be up shit creek as athletes. So
Yeah, I think they actually refer to me as a player performance.
that sounds a
Something
bit
like that.
fancy.
Yeah, athletic performance coach. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Athletic performance coach. And Harley, the guy that I work under, is the head of athletic performance. I'm like, oh, that's such a sick title.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because it kind of encompasses everything, right?
Mm.
It's something I kind of touched on it before in the convo before the conversation that was recorded. Is something at the moment that I'm finding very fascinating within my own training is taking the focus off the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much the focus off the gym, but the fact that the gym is there to support the numbers on the track.
Yeah.
And the numbers on the track are what matter. The numbers in the gym, the work that I'm doing in the gym isn't to get better at the gym, it's to get better on the track.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a very different perspective personally and feeling. And as much as you know it and you talk about it and you implement it with others, to actually feel the switch within myself and be like, okay, I need to emotionally detach from how much weight is on this safety squat bar because it doesn't actually matter. What matters is, am I strong enough? Am I getting faster on the track? If the answer to that is yes, just keep doing what I'm doing. If the answer is
Mm.
no, we need to look at why and then change something up. But what's on the safety squat bar just doesn't matter at all.
How have you found the adjustment to this different perspective within your training?
Tough, dude.
Mm.
Tough, like, yeah, challenging because I want to leave the gym with my ass hanging out because that's what I'm used to. And that's not the goal at the moment. The goal at the moment is to train extremely hard, but to leave the gym feeling better than what I came in.
Mm-hmm.
So that then I can go to my track day on Wednesdays and hit better times and create better shapes and hit better positions because that's the goal.
Hmm.
and kind of everything else is going to take care of itself. But yeah, it's definitely a hard kind of concept to wrap my head around, because to me, I'm like, oh, well, I could just put more weight on the bar. Like, I can do more. But the goal is to bring down my absolute strength, because we want to kind of bring up my max velocity. And so if you look at the force velocity curve, and the two bookends of that being absolute strength, which is slow, and max velocity, which is fast, um, being being strong and having more absolute strength is going to transfer to being fast to a point. Um, and having more max velocity is going to have less transfer to absolute strength or being strong. But what I require is enough strength to absorb an increased amount of body weight in ground force, and also decrease my chance of non-contact injury. Beyond that, I don't need any more absolute strength.
Mm.
What that strength is that's extra tissue that I have to carry through space while I'm running, which is going to make my ground force increase. It's going to make me slower because I'm carrying more weight. So ideally, I need to reduce the tissue that I'm carrying, have enough strength that I can absorb the amount of ground force that I'm putting in, and with the reduced weight, that ground force will decrease because it's less acting against gravity.
Hmm.
And as long as I maintain enough strength to decrease my chance of non-contact injury, that bisecting line between absolute strength and max velocity, which is peak power, is going to be where I need to land at. That's going to be in a better position. That's going to allow me to run and jump faster.
Yeah.
Um, and like, so I know that was like kind of like super autistic, but it was just me kind of like rolling through like my little like process in my brain of like what's happening, and living in that absolute strength is the only fucking thing that matters mindset for so long. It's been a hard switch to be like, well, actually, what matters now is the thing that's on the complete opposite end of this scale.
Yeah.
And you're all the way up here. So now what we need to do is we need to bring you all the way back down to where you're living in the middle here, where you have enough strength to do these things, and you have enough max velocity to do these things. And that's kind of where this peak power bisecting line is,
Mm.
which is where we want to live ideally.
Yeah.
Um, it's been hard mentally, but it's also a really fun challenge, dude. And it's fun because it's uncomfortable for me, because I
Mm.
suck at it at the moment.
Yeah. But again, like
Um,
the, I think the interesting part is like, we obviously speak about, just doing hard shit quite often. Putting yourself in a position where it's
hmm.
like you're training traits of athleticism that are literally on the other end of the spectrum for you. I mean, like out of curiosity, have you ever done like any like, outside of like your rugby training? Have you ever done any like actual like sprint work?
No, so we didn't do any sprint work at rugby training
Mm.
when I was playing. It was literally just like conditioning work. Our sprints were hundreds.
Yeah.
Like, but it was done for conditioning, not for sprinting. So it was like hundreds on the minute for half an hour.
Mm. Fuck, that's
Uh,
gross.
you'd kind of get there in about 16 seconds, and then you'd have 45 seconds rest and go again
Mm.
for half an hour straight. And then you'd do defensive drills after that. It was never like we never did speed work. Towards the back end of my career, there was a guy that ran. He was part of the club that I was in. He was our massage therapist, but he was a sprint coach. He was an older guy, and he ran sprint sessions at Glendale Track, which is the track that I was at the other day, on a Wednesday night for a $20 drop in. And it was just 45 minutes of just like speed, like fast feet drills and like run mechanics drills. And I got told that I had to go to that by the club that I was playing at because I was slow as fuck. And so I went for like 3 weeks and then broke my neck and never went back.
Mm.
I didn't break my neck at running. I broke my neck in a game
Yeah.
and decided that I wasn't going to do this anymore. And that's kind of when I retired. But so to answer your question, I've done 3 45-minute sessions of speed work. And
Nice.
that was it up until now. So it's
Yeah.
very, very new, which
Nice.
is another thing that I guess I'm kind of struggling with is as coaches and strength coaches and males, it's very easy for us to just gravitate towards the thing that we're good at because it gives us credibility, it gives us cachet, it makes us feel good because we're like, the man at something, and that kind of feeds into our ego a little bit. And so it's really hard to do something that I'm shit at, but know that I'm going to get better. And I know that I'm going to get better quickly because I know, like I put a story up the other day saying, I'm implementing um, the skill acquisition model of cognitive, associative, autonomous, and like if you know that skill acquisition model, it's what all structured learning uses. It's what universities use. It's what primary schools use. It's what fucking preschools use. It's all based off this learning system, which is how the brain processes and learns information. And when you know that, you can, if you're athletic enough to put the things into practice, which I believe I am, it's just a matter of learning what you need to do. And when you have a system of how to learn, it makes learning really easy.
Mm.
But it's fucking hard at the moment because I suck at it. And every time I do it, I know I suck at it. So I'm making a big effort to like film everything and put it on my stories as like a little bit of a desensitization tool for myself to be like, I accept that I suck at it and I'm still putting this out there to all of you to watch me suck at it, but also watch how fucking good I get really quickly
Mm.
because that's going to be the real story.
Yeah.
It's a fucking hit to the ego though, man. It's like, I just want, like, do you know how many times I watch my 300 kilo squat video a week just to be like, yeah, you're still the man. You
It's
squatted
fun.
300, bro. You're still the man.
I still have videos that I look back on and I go, yeah, you've squatted like this under this much weight. Like, you're worthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it is, right? It's like, it's oddly enough, it just becomes this weird yardstick that we use to measure whether or not like we're like worthy. And I
Mm.
think as I get older, it becomes easier because I heard someone say this recently, and I can't remember exactly who it was. It was on Zach's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It was on Zach and Tim's podcast. Tim was talking to him, so when we have Tim on, we can ask him about it. It was one of his guests who's a athletics coach, um, and he was talking about data points, and he was saying like you feel like that, you feel like you don't want to do things that you suck at, and you want to reinforce the things that you're good at, and that's what you want to show the world when you don't have enough data points to reinforce who you are to yourself.
Mm.
So for example, I know I know that I'm a great coach. I know what I'm talking about, and I know that I can get people results, etc., etc. More so than ever because of all of the data points that I have to reinforce that knowledge. Look, even just look at this podcast. This year alone, we've put out how many hours of useful information that just
Oh,
that's a lot of data points in and of itself that prove just because I suck at sprinting right now doesn't actually mean fucking jack shit. I'm still a fantastic athlete and I'm still a fantastic coach.
mm.
When you don't have those data points, it's the things that you do on a daily basis that reinforce that to yourself.
It's a very nice way to really like emphasize it, I think, as well. Like, if I look at some of the check-ins that I've had today with some of my athletes, like some of them have had days where they've been a little bit harsher on themselves, and I think, is justified. Um, people will look at certain things, and go, oh, like, that looks ugly or whatever it might be, and it's like, well, we're still in the process of building up a level of acquisition around the thing that we're trying to do. And I think like referring back to like those data points that we do have to go, despite our feelings and our thoughts about X, we have a list of things over here to kind of determine, well, no, like it's not as disastrous as you might be leading yourself to believe at the moment. Like we can kind of compartmentalize and differentiate between thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, and it also comes with age as well. It's like when I was 25, being the best athlete that I could, I needed to do that because it was all I fucking had. I was a shitbag. Like I didn't have anything else in my life that made me like a good person.
Mm.
So whereas now it's like I have all of these other data points that validate what I do outside of athletics or outside of being an athlete. It's like, yeah, cool. I'm a fucking washed up 38-year-old athlete, but I am a fantastic coach that has 20 years experience. I'm a great husband. I'm a great friend. I'm pretty comfortable in saying that. Like I have all of these data points that validate who I am as a person. It's like, yeah, cool. Like I can't run really fast at the moment. Like big deal. But when I was 25, it was like, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm going to keep leaning into the thing that I'm good at because that's what makes me who I am.
Mm.
People need to see that. Otherwise, they're not going to talk to me anymore
Mm.
because I have nothing else.
Yeah, I think it definitely becomes a lot easier, as you said. Like the older you get, the more you can kind of zoom out on a lot of different aspects of like what makes you you, and then sort of differentiate and go, well, yeah, like there's one aspect that I might be putting a lot of effort into, may not be going quite the way I want it to, but and that's where you can kind of create a bit of space and have a bit of perspective as well. I think that's a really helpful point to sort of land on.
Yeah, it's been an interesting transition training wise. I'm really enjoying it. I feel completely different.
Mm.
Obviously, the training at the moment is very much geared towards changing um, changing kind of how I move,
Mm-hmm.
um, building some elasticity, building some hop, like building some resiliency through tendons, positions, and things like that. Looking to reduce joint angles with things like isometrics to facilitate the same stimulus with a reduction in joint angles. Where it's like when you go into strength sports, obviously that doesn't need to be a consideration because you need to get enough work move like doing a squat. You need to do a squat. You need to do a lot of squats if you're going to get really strong at being a squatter, right? Or a lot of leg presses. That's the nature of the beast, right? Whereas when we look at what I'm doing at the moment is like we want to save those joint angles for the track. So what work can we get in the gym while looking to reduce the amount of joint actions that occur
Yeah.
in those sessions. So things like isometrics have been really big. Um, and then if we look at what absolute strength is, which is like the where I was living and where you've been primarily living for a very long time as well, and I'm sure you're probably noticing the same thing, is when we think about strength athletes, their sport is towards the ground and backwards. If you look at every other sport, it's away from the ground and forwards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much a different style of moving. And if we look at absolute strength as an eccentric based movement, so like a squat and a bench and like a yielding isometric, for example, would be like an eccentric dominant movement. And then if we look at um, peak power as a concentric dominant movement, so like a deadlift for example, would be like a really good expression of a peak power and overcoming isometric. Like that's what's dominating my training at the moment because that's where I'm lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at wanting to work on max velocity, that's going to be an eccentric followed by a concentric. So like typically like a plyometric, for example. So a lot of my training is any strength work that I'm doing is very much accentuating the eccentric. So it's an eccentric dominant. So like a 3 second eccentric, for example, which is also very load limiting, but it leans into the aspect of absolute strength being an eccentric dominant movement or quality. And then pretty much everything else within the program is, well, to be honest, most of the absolute strength stuff that I'm doing is from yielding isometrics. And what isn't is a slow eccentric. And then everything else is concentric or a fast eccentric and a fast concentric, focusing on like plyometrics and peak power type stuff.
Mm.
So it's just super interesting, dude, because it's completely different.
Yeah.
And the way my body feels is different.
How so?
Well, my knee's not hurting at all, which is beautiful. Didn't hurt when I ran, doesn't hurt when I walk around the house, never hurts at all. Haven't taken Celebrex, which is my arthritis medication for. I stopped halfway through last week and I haven't got back on it. I haven't needed it.
Mm-hmm.
That was after like 3 sessions. I feel like I don't know. I feel bouncier.
Good.
Like for example, today was session 1 in week 2,
Mm-hmm.
so it was my first repeat session.
Yep.
So it was the first kind of gauge that I have on how much different am I now after 1 week.
Mm.
And the biggest thing that I noticed was on it's like so after I do a loaded, I do a loaded yielding split squat isometric, front foot elevated split squat isometric, heavy. It's like an RPE 9 for 30 seconds. So I used 250 kilo dumbbells today. So like that's 100 kilos with a vertical shin, front foot elevated split squat, holding for 30 seconds. That is fucking hard, dude.
Mm.
Like that makes me want to die by the end of 30 seconds. And then straight after that is into like a depth drop, a step off like step off 1 foot, land on 2, with the goal of as short a contact time as possible.
So is that like drop off, land, then jump back up?
Yep. Drop off, land, jump back up. So step off 1, land on 2, and jump vertically as soon as you hit the ground with as least amount of contact time as possible. So I noticed the biggest difference on that plyometric because last week my contact time was huge. I would land on the balls of my feet, my heels would touch the ground, my knees would absorb some force, and then I would jump off the ground. And that's kind of all I could manage.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm trying really hard to have short contact time here, but this is all I got. Today, I was able to step off the same height box, but when I landed on the balls of my feet. My heels didn't touch the ground at all. I probably had like half a centimeter of like knee absorption, and then I was off the ground straight away. So
Nice.
most of the absorption was just like boots and straight up, and it was like my Achilles and like my knees, that the tendons felt like they were just able to absorb and spring a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And we know like tendon remodeling, the isometrics are great for that, and it happens very quickly. Like we can make meaningful change really, really quickly in that space. But it's cool to see happen in person.
Mm.
So yeah, that's
nice.
my rant. How are you feeling? You've been doing a lot of that shit too. Have you noticed that you're starting to feel a little bit different?
I've noticed that just like a lot of my joint discomfort that I get has decreased significantly. Like
Hmm.
even when I did like, so for example, like for me to do a supinated chin up is pretty hard because I don't have the range of that bottom position to be like overhead with like a fully supinated arm. Whereas obviously to get to the top of like a chin up and hold in a supinated grip there, like that's not that challenging. Like, it's a pretty easy position to get into. But what I notice is like I get to that position there, and it's like if I'm trying to maintain like the torso position I am, and then like keep my core doing what it should be doing and keep my lower body where I want it to be, it's like, oh fuck, there's actually a lot of hard work here. And that's where, because I don't always have access to like a clock when I'm doing these things, I usually tend to go off breath.
Hmm.
So I'll go, it might be like, cool, like we're going to hold here for a dozen breaths. And it's a, and working with that breath cycle, I find is a really nice way to challenge it. Like there's obviously times where I'm like, I can put myself in a position where I can time. But
Hmm.
obviously when you're on a bar and you're up here, it's not like you can be like,
Let me just have a look.
yeah. So like that has been good. Like with the like isometric back extensions, I've been doing like the single leg ones. Like from it's quite interesting again. Like when I look back to some of the injuries that I have sustained over my lifetime. Like I've had so like we've spoken a bit about it before, like a pretty severe back injury. I've had a pretty severe ankle injury where I tore all of the tendons, jarred the ankle joint, strained my soleus. Like fucked that up pretty good. You know, I've
Hmm.
almost torn a hamstring entirely off the bone back in my track days. You know, like there's been some pretty decent stuff that's happened there, and like to the point where like obviously like I tore my hamstring, and just like even when I do like hamstring curls, like there's a very distinct difference between like my left side and my right side.
Hmm.
But then doing some of these isometrics, it's like, oh, like they're starting to feel a little bit more similar. And then like,
Hmm.
you know, even just in terms of like how when I contract my glutes, like after doing like isolated and isometric like back extension holds, it's like I'm gonna set my body in the same positions and then just hold there.
Hmm.
And then like feeling like certain areas light up on one side where I'm like, oh, like this area has felt like almost dormant for years because of, you know, not having done enough appropriate rehab work after this injury from X amount of years ago.
Hmm.
I think getting to a point where like introducing some of those like isometrics has been a really good way to build up some of that like tendon and ligament strength and sort of actually give that the TLC that's obviously been needing for some time.
Hmm.
But then overlaying it with like some protocols that I've run for a lot of like my back rehab in the past that I know works really, really well.
Hmm.
Like it's a really nice balance to go, hey, look, we're going to go a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, and then a little bit from column C, and like really blend like a few approaches together quite nicely. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like I was talking to a guy that I bump into every once in a while at the gym who works for my old physio, who's like he and I used to run track in high school together. He now runs like a physio and like, you know, athletic development business. And they also have like a subsequent like track team that they help, you know, well, like it's like the company's called like Melbourne Athletic Development, so it's like called like MAD, and they've got like their MAD
Hmm.
track team.
Hmm.
Like they've had athletes compete in the Olympics before. Like they do very, very well for themselves. I was talking to him about obviously like the combine that we're doing next year, and he's like, yeah, he goes, obviously with you being as strong as you are, he goes, you'll probably find that your biggest challenge will be like your ankles.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh well, funny that like I've also like completely fucked up my right ankle. I tore all the tendons, like I jarred the ankle joint, like I did a bit of a doozy on it a couple of years ago. And he's like, oh, he goes, well that'll be even shit. So like he was even talking about like, you know, potentially going and doing like some like testing and stuff on like force plates and that sort of thing. But like he's like, you know, we can actually assess what your like contact time is, how much force you can actually develop, where you're actually landing on your feet. And he goes, we can
Hmm.
start to really filter that into some like specific stuff for you so that when you do start running again, it's like you're not going to end up injured. Because that's
Yeah,
obviously
I'm
like
buying
that's
some.
oh nice. Because
Yeah,
that's
I
obviously like
sent.
go on.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say I sent my new client Lockie. Shout out Lockie. Is he's an ex S&C coach and owns the sports remedial massage and physio clinic up here that any athlete that's an athlete kind of goes to. They're pretty
Mhm.
well known in the space up here. And he's like really into all of that stuff. So um, coaching him at the moment into like a track meet himself.
Mhm.
He's an ex basketball player who's been training a little bit like a bodybuilder for the last um, 12 months or so, but he's also now playing rep tennis. So
Mhm.
um, that's a cool kind of like programming spectrum that we're working with. But he's like really into the force velocity plates and stuff like that. So I sent him a link and I was like, I think I'm going to buy these. And he said, "Give me a sec." And he reached out to a couple of his mates, and he was like, "Apparently, this is the best brand in the space at the moment. They have really accurate readings. They're portable, they're easy to use." And he said, "I have a mate in Newcastle who has a set. If you want to go and try them out before you buy them." I was like, "Fuck yeah!" Like, so I'm going to tee that up and
Nice.
go and have a crack on them before I buy them. But we're definitely going to get a set
Mm.
so that we can use them mostly with myself. But I'm justifying it that we're going to use them with our athletes so that it's a
Yeah,
tax write-off.
very good.
But I'll definitely be using them with Lockie as well, and the other athletes that I have from the footy teams and the stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but it's mostly for myself because I want to see that stuff. It's fun.
Yeah, nice. But
Um,
yeah, like no, all
but yeah,
the
it's crazy that they're even like portable and stuff now too. Dude, they're getting so cool. Like back in
yeah,
the day, that shit was like
it was like
not.
bolted into. It was like a landline versus a
Yeah, it
mobile
was like,
phone.
yeah, exactly. You had to
Mm.
carry it around in a suitcase. It's not like that anymore, dude. It's like these things are sleek.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how far like some of the technologies are coming as well. Like in terms of like what they can do and what they can display. Yeah, fucking cool.
Yeah, you should do it though. It'll be super interesting to see because then you can go back and measure at specific intervals. And like we were saying, like that kind of stuff, that's a measurable thing that matters.
Mm. Like this is also like I've got a few like measures in my mind of like things I would like to be able to look at measuring down the track. There's one
Three
in particular,
inches.
3.2 on a good day.
Okay.
No, but like one of the things that like I want to be able to do is I want to be able to go like this is something I'm going to have to work up to, but like get like a 20-meter run up and then measure the distance that I can achieve off like 3 single leg bounds and like
Hmm.
see how far I can bound and how much power I can produce from that single leg. And like obviously this is not something I'm going to start off doing, but that's where my mind's like, the inner meathead in me still wants to be like power and strength and like how can I tie that into some conditioning stuff, but be able to go like, well, you're going to have contact where there's potentially going to be a decrease in your ability to produce force off that.
There will be.
Yeah, but it's like, well, how like if at the start once I get to a point where that is something I can actually measure without being a fuckwit, can I go bang, bang, bang? Like, what's the measurement? Cool. Like in 4 weeks' time, I'm going to come back. I'm going to measure that again. Stuff like the
Yep.
force plate, stuff like my vert, my broad, like have all of those as measurable things where it's like these are overarching things that we're using to kind of dictate what goes on down here. Like I think I was saying to you, like the client that I have that's doing the specialist selection for military at the end of the year,
Hmm.
like we haven't done any running, but we made pretty significant improvements on her beep test scores. Like she started off and it was like a 6.4 on the beep test, and I'm like, it's going to need a bit of work, but there's some niche
Hmm.
shit that we're working through.
Hmm.
And with all the conditioning work that we've done, we literally took her from a 6.4 to like a 7.8 in like 7 weeks.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and like
Did you
she
do any beep tests in that time?
no,
Nice.
like there was like literally like we got to a point where I was like, hey, look, we've been training for like 7 weeks. Like I'm probably going to want an updated test score to kind of like determine like the next little block of training that we're going to do. Can you, like, before we start this next block of training, can you go and do like a retest for me? And it was like push-ups went up by like 30%, pull-ups, that's like going to be a big area of focus for us in the next like block of training. Sit-ups increased by like 88% or something ridiculous like that. And beep test went up from like 6.4 to like 7.8, or like it was significant increases.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always like, I find it really interesting. Like, obviously, when we look at powerlifters, like quite often we'll be like, oh, like we're not going to sit there and say to someone, hey, look, every 8 weeks, I want you to retest all your lifts and see where you've progressed to. Like, it's a little
No,
bit more of a
we can
different
use
approach.
we can use 1RM calculators for that.
But that's the thing, is like, we can utilize like rep targets and be like, hey, look, we're going to go off and we're going to do 5RM testing tonight. And we're going to.
What's wrong with a 1RM calculator? We can use those, can't we?
I mean, we can if you want.
Yeah, because that way, if I just want a bigger 1RM, I just lower the perceived RPE. And
Fuck,
then
you're a
I'm
magician.
stronger.
Fuck, you're a magician.
Voila. I'm
So
stronger.
that's where I like taking the RPE factors out of it and just going, cool, well, you're going to squat as much weight as you can for this many reps, and that's going to be your estimated 1RM, not the reps at a certain weight for a supposed RPE. Like, we're just going absolute numbers here.
Yeah, because you can easily just go, that wasn't a
That's how I like to go.
7.5.
It's a bit of fun.
That was a 7. That puts my 1RM much higher. I like that way better.
Yeah, but like, the whole, I don't know, like, I find 1RM calculators to be a little bit, I mean, like, are we going to do a bit of a, do you want to do a bit of 1RM or estimated 1RM calculations at the moment?
Hell no.
Oh, we're going to do it.
No, my 1RMs would be terrible at the moment. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even. I would have no idea. I haven't even done anything that would be on the scale.
All right. Well, let's say we're going to go say 150 for, say, 3 reps, and that's going to give me a calculated 1 rep max off my close grip bench. So it says my 1 rep max is 158.8 kilos if I can bench 150 for 3.
Beauty. Take it.
I reckon I could do more.
You reckon?
Yeah, like, I know with me, like, I've oscillated between like 2 phases. I've had one stage where like my rep work is atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so for example, many, many, many moons ago, there was a stage where my best set of 5 for squats was, I think, 215 kilos. But my best set of, or my best single was, I think, 277 and a half.
Nice.
It does not compute.
Not very nice.
No. Like, sorry, go on.
So what are you? So what are you at now? Is your rep work? You're saying your top end work is better than your rep work at the moment?
Well, so generally speaking, I would say that, yeah. So I've had, like, I've had moments where I've built my rep work up really, really nicely, to the point where like the increase on the 1RM wasn't quite what I was really expecting. Like, I, at that stage where I had, so that was 215 in for 5 in wraps. And I think my best set of 5 in sleeves was like 190.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up taking my sleeve squat up to 240 for a single. So I ended up squatting 215 for 5 in sleeves. Ended up squatting 225 for 3 in sleeves, and then ended up retesting for 240 for 1. And that was like a pretty like there may have been like a 240, 2.5 squat there, but I was like for the extra 2.5, I was
It
like,
was
fuck that.
close to the limit.
Yeah. And then when I went back into wraps, I ended up taking 240 for 5, just because I always have a big difference between my sleeve squat and my wrap squat.
Mm-hmm.
And then that when I went and competed at the end of that prep, I still only ended up with a 280 squat, but it was like significantly easier than it previously had been. So I would be curious to obviously if I did another run at like a wrapped squat 1RM, obviously with what we're aiming for, it's probably not in the books for this year.
Just do it after.
But I was gonna say, like, I think for like after the combine in
You'll
Feb,
be in a sick position then to push your squat anyway. Because think how healthy your ankles, knees, and hips are going to be.
yeah,
Woo, that's
it'll
good.
just
It'll handle that work really well.
yeah, and that's where like I look at it. I'm like, when my squat was at the stage where I was like, I'm probably the happiest with it. It's like, yeah, like my body was moving really well. So I'll be curious to see how things go when we do navigate down there. But I think like historically for me, I've always been the person that hasn't been as good with like sets of 5, sets of 6, sets of 8, that sort of thing, versus like sets of like 1, 2s, and 3s.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always been like, you give me like heavier weights to move and do it for less reps. And generally speaking, I can do that a lot better than I can across reps.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of using those sets of 7s, 8s, 9s plus for to build strength in those like squat, bench, deadlift
There,
especially.
there's
It's like
one time I really like them though.
I'm just not sure it translates over to that top end strength because there's a big. Here's the thing: if you're getting stronger at doing 7 reps, for
Mm-hmm.
example, at say 200 kilos, you do 200 kilos this week, and then next week you do 205 PR times 7 reps. The week after that you do 210. Oh, PR'd my 7 reps. Week after that you do 215. PR my 7 reps. Fuck, I'm getting really strong. I'm PRing every week. There's a big difference between 220 kilos for 7 reps and 300 kilos for 1 rep.
Mm-hmm.
That's fucking different. And
Yeah.
if you're not getting that work at those heavy singles, it's just like, yeah, you might be getting quote unquote stronger because your 7 rep is going up, but that's not going to translate to the platform because on the platform you do 1 rep and
Mm.
300 kilos feels a lot fucking different to 220 regardless of how many reps you're doing. It's that feeling of this is going to crush me through to the center of the earth that you need to fight against to complete those reps. You don't get that feeling when you're doing that high rep stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like I still utilize some of that higher rep stuff for a specific reason, and that's like kind of I would kind of put it in the perspective of like I have some clients that when things get a little bit hard and a little bit heavier, they just give up because they're like they don't know how to work. So I sometimes like to use sets of like 6 to 8, 6 to 10 on those like the comp spec lift to be like cool, like it's gonna get really shit around about rep 7, and I want you to be able to like figure out how to dig a little bit deeper so that when I'm like, hey, cool, like we're gonna do some really heavy shit now, and you're gonna have to utilize that same concept of digging deep. Like you kind of know how to do it because you did it at a weight that's not as heavy. But I agree
Mm-hmm.
with you, like like I've pulled, I've done 220 for 10 before. Like it was hard, but it was like I still did it. But then like I remember like when I tried to YOLO yeet 300, like I got to a point where like I'd pulled all of the slack and I'm like, I'm still on the ground, but I'm like, I don't feel like I've actually put in the level of intent to actually get to break the ground. And then I did that. It started coming off the ground and my pelvis was like, how about no?
Yeah, because it's heavy as fuck. Like
Yeah. And like,
there's a big difference between that 80 kilos.
yeah,
Whew,
separates the boys from the men
yeah,
and categorize
it's
me as a
different.
boy.
Yeah, but it just really highlights the had you have been doing a bunch of singles at really high intensity work,
Mm.
your chances would have been higher that you would have been able to get that rep because you're getting that work in. You're used to that feeling of like, okay, this weight's really heavy, and organizing yourself against that heavy weight is different.
Mm. Yeah, but I think this is like where like there's a principle in particular that I really like, and that's the SAID principle. The specific adaptation to an imposed demand. You doing heavy sets of 8 doesn't equal a strong one. Like to get better at doing one, like you need to practice doing one. Um,
Yes, exactly.
but
It gets you stronger
yeah, like I think there is obviously
at
like
doing eights.
yeah, I think there is like a degree of validity in terms of, you know, especially if someone is coming back from, for lack of a better term, piss fighting around in their training for a little bit, putting them in like certain percentage ranges where it's like, hey, look, we're going to give you rep ranges to work with here. Like, for example, I'm using rep ranges at certain percentage increments with one of my clients, Tegan. She might have, you know, 2 sets of 4 to 8 reps at like 75%. It's like, cool. I want to see how hard you can actually dig into your tank. I want to see how hard you can actually push you. Like you're not doing 4 or 5 sets of this. It's like 1 to 2 sets. But I want to see how hard you can work with this because then it will kind of set up a bit of a predictor of like once we get up to 85, 90, 95%, how much can we actually push the reps here and have we actually built enough degrees of tolerance within the tissues to justify loading you within these the parameters that we are going to be looking for, because like some of the goals that we have, we want to be able to look at repping 130 on a deadlift. We want to be able to look at repping, I think it's like 55, like 4 reps on her bench, which she's very, very close to. And we want to look at squatting 100 for somewhere between 3 and 5 reps. Given that her heaviest squat we've ever hit in comp is like 102, if she can be in a position
Nice.
where she's squatting 100 for like 3 to 5, like she'll be very, very strong. Her heaviest comp bench I think is 55 or 57. And we're looking at cracking like a 60 kilo bench this year. Looking at cracking a 140 plus deadlift. Like she's very much on the path of like being set up to hit these numbers really hard. But like for me, in terms of how I'm applying higher rep stuff for her, it's very much like I'm setting you up to be able to do something that is hard, but not hard in the sense of like the load lifted. Like I want you to learn that like when things get hard mentally, you're going to have to dig into a chasm, and you need to be able to access that with weights that aren't going to be like throwing you a fucking curveball as well, so that when the weights do start throwing you a curveball, you're familiar with that cavern already, and we can go, all right, cool. Like this is our second home after the last X amount of weeks of pretty much beating the shit out of you when it comes to the load that we have been using.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a time and place for that.
Yeah.
Just like there's a time and a place for the heavy singles. Like you're not going to be having her do 7, 8s, 9s 3 weeks out from her next meet because
No.
that's ridiculous. That's not what she's going to be doing
No.
in the meet. Like everything's going to be low rep. Like even the secondary work is going to be low rep because it's like there's no point doing fucking 7 reps on something when you're 2 weeks out. It's fucking retarded.
There's no need.
There's literally no need. That's doing way more harm than it's doing good. In every aspect. So it's like let's be smart about this. And if we don't even have a topic today. This could even just be something that we talk about for a little while, seeing as how we have time to feel. Is like, what does periodization look like for different sports? I mean, powerlifting is beautiful in the sense that you have one meet that you're focusing on at a time, and that meet is on a certain date that
Mm-hmm.
and you can quite literally from that date backwards reverse engineer your plan backwards and have significant blocks of training that kind of feed into each other and have you ready on that day, which is obviously what our job is as a strength coach, and what your job is as a powerlifter, is to be ready on the day and to be quote unquote peaked on the day to put in your best performance. And early in that prep, or further away from that competition, there might be other things that take priority, like rep work, like conditioning, like getting really comfortable in positions, eccentrics, pauses, etc., etc., etc. And then the closer we get to the competition, we move through certain phases or certain blocks of training where the reps come down and the lifts get more specific, and the accessories get less, and the conditioning gets less to manage fatigue. And we slowly get to the point where we're hitting heavy, low rep competition spec lifts, which with not a lot else in the program, a little bit here and there to keep the body happy, but the majority of the work is going to be pointed towards what we need to do in our competition. And we do that for a period of time that gets you ready for the comp. You do the comp, and then you go back into a different phase of training. And that's obviously completely different to any other sport, or sports that are played on a much more regular basis, where you might not be able to use that kind of block periodization model, because if we look at like the general athletic qualities, or if we look at GPP, for example, and we take the actual meaning of GPP, not the I'm going to drag sleds around in circles meaning of GPP, but if we take the actual meaning of GPP being general qualities prepared specifically, and then we look at what those general qualities are, being strength, speed, and endurance, and then we say, okay, if I want to be proficient in those qualities for my sport, and my sport is played every single week, I might not be able to do a block of training that focuses on strength, and then the next one or two blocks that focus on strength, and then the next one or two blocks focus on speed, and then the next one or two blocks focus on endurance, because I need all of those qualities at the same time, because my sport is played every single week. Like, what if in week one I come up against a team that's like really small and I need to be really, really fast, but I have just come off a strength block, so then I'm fucked. But then 3 weeks down the track, I come up against a team that's really, really big, and I need to be strong and robust. Otherwise, I'm just going to get hammered all day. But oh, bad luck, buddy. We haven't done any strength because we're in a speed block. You're really fast, but you're not going to be able to show that strength because you're just going to get hammered all day. So we need to have this base level of all of these qualities all of the time, which, you and I shit on this quite a bit on this podcast in terms of powerlifting, but this is kind of a really perfect example of where I would literally lean more towards a weekly undulating conjugate type of model, where you can train strength, speed, and endurance, and you can train it in a max effort, a dynamic, and a repeated effort each week. And you can train each of those qualities within each of those facets. So I'm not saying strength is max effort and speed is dynamic and endurance is repeated, because that's naturally where your brain's going to go. I'm saying we can train strength maximally, dynamically, and endurance based. We can train speed, max, dynamic, and endurance. And we can train endurance, max effort, and dynamic and repeated, on a rotating weekly undulating basis, so that at all times, all qualities are maintained.
Sounds awfully a lot like CrossFit.
Almost. But you missed the part where I said prepared specifically, not randomly.
Mm.
That's the part.
I feel like
That's
if you'd had
key.
a mustache, you would have done like a little bit of a mustache twirl just then.
Did I just tease him?
I think you did.
So I had to keep talking because you froze a couple of times, and I didn't want to stop like mid sentence.
Wasn't sure if that was you or me.
And then once I started, I was like, "Oh, he's gonna freeze, so I'm gonna keep going." And then once I got going, it was kind of like just a little bit of a Bit of a ball downhill. I
It's like,
apologize.
oh no, the can of worms has been opened.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if you think about the powerlifting, for example, like
Mm,
you and I really like that block style of training because it really makes sense in the standpoint that like the skill is those competition lifts. That's the sport, like that's the skill aspect of the sport. But then it's also like
mm,
you need to develop strength within that skill because it's a strength sport. So the skill is also the strength aspect that we need to develop. So it's like, cool, we're not going to deviate too far from these comp lifts. We're going to deviate far enough that we can stay healthy. Like one or two standard deviations is probably as far as you're going to go most of the time if you're a fairly active competitor. And by fairly active, two, three competitions a year, you're not really going to deviate a whole bunch. Like you're probably going to squat most of the time. You're probably going to bench most of the time. You're going to deadlift most of the time. Variations of, whereas that's not the case in many other sports.
mm. I feel like it's quite interesting, and again, like we've had a few discussions over the last like little while. After we've listened to a very specific podcast episode with someone that will eventually be a guest on this podcast, and obviously like specific to basketballers, the approach that I have taken with the club that I'm working with at the moment, thankfully, it kind of ties in, fairly closely to what they're talking about. Just obviously, a little bit differently. Like I think the level that they're working at makes it a little bit easier to apply some of the concepts that they're investigating a little bit more in a way that's probably a little bit more meaningful than like with me. Like I essentially have written a program for the guys in the club, and it's like, cool, like if you guys want it, here it is. Um, but we don't really do any direct like gym work as a club. Like that's something that hopefully for next year when we get into a preseason, I can actually say to the head coach like, hey, this is how I want to structure, the S&C work that we are going to do for these guys, but utilize the training work that we're doing as more of a, hey, this is all like injury prevention. Like there's a lot of isometric holds in position. There are a lot of change of direction drills. There's a lot of speed and agility work, and not as much of the, hey, we're just going in there to get brutally strong. Like that's not really super applicable for basketballers, but like I want them to be fast and I want them to be agile, but I want them to have enough tissue tolerance that they can withstand the force demands of the positions that they are inevitably going to get into. And that's kind of how I've looked at using a lot of the strength components that I have given these guys. It's like, yeah, they're like, there's high box squat. So it's like, we're not looking so much at, you know, trying to push as much weight, but it's like, I want you to move with intent within these positions. And I've specifically given you movement restricted because where you jump from is not in a full deep squat. So there's no point me putting you there because that's irrelevant. And then obviously, like if we sort of like look at that comparatively to say powerlifters, and when we are going, hey, we need to be squatting to a certain depth, and we need to be, benching to our chest, and we need to be focusing on X, Y, and Z within these positions. The requirements of how we periodize these blocks over time very much changes. Like if I'm again sort of going back to the basketball team, our season lasts for I think 17 weeks. Being able to maintain or to develop and maintain certain qualities within that sort of strength, speed, and endurance. It's like the speed requirements they have, they don't need to run any further than 40 meters at any given time before they're going to stop, change directions, and take off again. Like that means that like the speed work for them, I don't really need them to be able to run 100 meters consistently and as fast as possible because they're never going to run 100 meters straight. They're going to run for an absolute maximum 40 meters before they have some sort of change of direction. And that's obviously going to mean a very brief moment in time where they stop. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to do with them specifically from a conditioning perspective is cool. Well, we don't need to run super long distances. Like I just need to make you fast over, X amount of distance. And then I need you to have enough endurance that you can have repeated efforts here for potentially upwards of 40 minutes, because that's how long a game is going to last. Like we have 4 10-minute quarters, but a game can take anywhere from like an hour and 40 to 2 hours to complete based on stoppages and timeouts and that sort of shit. So like, they potentially need the lungs and the capacity to run for 2 hours, but it's 40 minutes of actual work.
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
think that's
exactly. So it's like those it's a lot of repeated dynamic efforts,
yeah.
but then there's also a lot of sustained back and forth a lot of the time as well.
Mm. And this is, I
So
think,
it's a mixture of both.
the interesting part as well of like having worked with athletes in different sports. Like I did a little bit of work with like VFL umpires for AFL a couple of years ago, and it was like, I sort of like talked to them like, what's the biggest issue that your umpires have issues with, and they were talking about like hamstring strains, and it's like, oh well, cool, like you guys do a shitload of backwards running, but you do nothing to strengthen the hamstrings, which are going to play a big role within that. Like we started throwing in, hinge patterns for them, and we saw, I think it was like a 17% reduction in hamstring injuries within the first 6 weeks of their season starting.
17% is huge.
Fucking enormous. And that was from
Dude,
something.
if you could do that in the NFL or NBA, you'd be a fucking millionaire.
Yeah. Like, again,
You'd
these
name your
guys.
price. Imagine if you could say to the NBA, like, hey, Golden State, like, I'll reduce your hamstring strains by 17%. I'd be like, yeah, dude, name your price. Fucking serious? Absolutely.
I want 1% of all the players' salaries.
Yeah. You're the richest man on the planet.
Yeah. But like, it's always pretty interesting. Like, again, I think the way that I've kind of, and this has been the really interesting part for me in the last like 6 months of, sort of extending my area of operations other than just pure strength and pure powerlifting into being a little bit more athletic development. Obviously, we spoke a little bit earlier before we jumped on tonight about one of the opportunities that has come up for me in the next little while. I'm actively going to be trying to work with some athletes in a little bit more of a non-powerlifting setting, in terms of like working with basketballers, working with track athletes, and working with people that work in, quote unquote, like real sports. Um, Sorry to all the powerlifters who are listening at the moment. I love you all. But I think getting into a position where we are, sort of developing capacities outside of just that top end 1RM strength. I think obviously what you were sort of talking a little bit earlier about in terms of, where you're transitioning to in terms of not being about bar weight, it's more about track speed. Whereas I think for me at the moment, it's like, it's not as much, like there's still a little bit of like, I'm still, emphasizing weight on the bar, but like where my focus on training at the moment is, it's like, well, like distances jumped and like my power output rather than like speed. And like, I think expanding our perceptions of, again, like this, it's always really interesting to like how this ties into like psychology and ego and all that sort of shit as well. But I think, with you and I obviously being involved in powerlifting for as long as we have been, when we then do start to like dip our toe outside of that pond, and it's like, oh, well, we're kind of like, testing the waters on a pond over here. It's, like it's quite challenging, but I look at it quite as like something that's quite fun. And, if we do zoom out a little bit more and look at it purely from like the lens of a business, you and I have built pretty big businesses around strength and powerlifting. And obviously, while we are certainly by no stretch of the imagination, removing ourselves from those ponds, I think having a wider range of tools to be able to utilize in terms to be able to work with a broader range of athletes makes work also a little bit more interesting. Like, I know I've spoken to you a little bit over the last few weeks where I've got some clients that have no interest in getting on the platform, and they're some of the clients I enjoy working with the most, because it allows me to essentially like flex other parts of my brain, where it's like, it's not just well, what can I do to make this person squat better? What can I do to make this person have a 10 kilo increase on their deadlift in the next X amount of weeks? Like, It's a, well, how can I get this person to be stronger within these things? But then how can I get them to add, you know, another like 1.4 levels to their beep test without actually getting them to run? Like that for
Hmm.
me, it's like it's fun.
Yeah, dude, it's really fun, and it's just, I mean, it comes back to the addiction that I have of solving problems. I think
Yeah.
it's like, this is how we started the podcast. Was my brain is so fucking logical, like almost to a fault, where it's like, if I get presented with a problem, like it's literally just like an instinct. It's like, okay, I need to find a solution like as
Mm.
quick as possible. Like I don't care. I don't give a fuck about like the feelings involved. I don't give a fuck about like anything emotional. Like I do struggle with. I'm way better at it now than I have ever been, just through age and experience, and just not being as much of a fuckwit that I was in the past. But my brain is still very much wired towards logic. So it's
Mm.
like, if I'm presented with a problem, I want to solve it, and that's how I look at athletes. I look at every athlete as a problem. Like, okay, you want this goal. How do I solve that?
Mm.
Like, you want this goal, but you're not there yet. So there's obviously a reason why you haven't achieved it yet. Why is that? How do I solve that? And it's like, the more problems that I'm presented with, like, it's what gets my juices flowing. You and I have spoken about this a lot. It's like, oh fuck, your post today about like, I encourage all of my, my lifters to have
Hobbies and shit like that.
hobbies, right? And I read that right before I went to the gym, and like I showed it to Em, and I was like, do you think it's bad that like I don't have a hobby? Because like anything that I do that like isn't just like solving problems, or like that's my hobby. It's like coaching is my hobby because it's what gets my brain going, and when I'm not doing that, I'm like trying to figure out, like, add more tools to my bank so that I can solve more problems, because that's quite literally like almost an addiction to me at this point. It's like caffeine and solving problems are like like they're the two things.
Nice.
It's like, okay, caffeine, modafinil, problems, those three things, I'm good. Like I'm good forever. Like those are my things.
Mm.
So then if we look at, okay, like what are the problems within powerlifting? It's squat, bench, and deadlift, absolute strength. How do we stay injury free long enough to express our absolute strength in those three things on the day that it matters? Like beyond that, like that's the problem,
Hmm.
in a nutshell. And it's like, are you falling short because of the skill aspect of the three things? Are you falling short because you're not strong enough? Or are you falling short because you're continually injured, or you're not prepared to be in the positions required under the load that we want?
Hmm.
And it's going to fall probably in one of those three buckets, or a combination of those three buckets. So your problem solving for me generally goes down one of those three, or a combination of those three routes, to land up in the position on competition day having an answer. Okay, so then if we kind of go back to the big fucking autistic reel that I did not long ago about an athlete, it's like every week is a problem, um, because it's like, okay, so how do we train? How do we train these three qualities, or these multiple qualities? We need to touch them all to a certain degree. Okay, but this athlete is maybe leaning more towards the strength side of things. We need to bring them back more towards like the dynamic side of things, or the max velocity side of things, which is where I really like this kind of like approach of this undulating conjugate, weekly undulating conjugate model, is kind of like a problem solving tool that allows me to solve a lot of problems at once, because
Mm.
it's definitely not something that I would ever apply to powerlifting, because if we think about what it is, it's like, we're talking strength, speed, and endurance. In powerlifting, it's pretty much just strength that matters, out of those three qualities for the most part, and that's what's going to get you the chocolates.
Yep.
If we're training, max effort, we want to be looking somewhere around the like under 3 sets, under 3 reps at like 8 RPE and higher. If we're training like a dynamic quality, which is like a max velocity, we're going to be training like something around like 6 sets and above with under 3 reps at like 60 to 70%. I would kind of class that as like a dynamic effort. But what that's training is max velocity, and we know that max velocity doesn't transfer to absolute strength.
Mm.
But absolute strength does transfer to an extent to max velocity. So it's like, if I'm a powerlifter, I'm probably not going to focus on doing a whole bunch of like dynamic work because it's not going to transfer to the absolute strength, which is the quality that matters. Whereas if I'm an athlete, I need both.
Mm.
And I
So
need to train all of those aspects, both maximally and dynamically and repeatedly.
mm.
So it's not like my max effort is my strength work. It's like my strength work needs to be trained max effort 1 week, and then maybe the next week my strength work is dynamic effort, and then maybe the week after that my strength work is repeated effort, and then on week 1 my speed work might be dynamic effort, and the week after that my speed work might be max effort, and the week after that my speed work might be repeated effort. So it undulates between the three. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In amongst all the freezes and glitches and shit.
Yeah, we're just rolling with it, bro.
Fuck.
We're hanging. This is, you know what? Technology is not going to beat me today.
So I feel like you're the one that normally gets really aggravated. I feel like you're like cool as a cucumber, whereas I'm sitting here being like, I'm about to fucking punch my fucking computer screen because it's giving me the
Nah,
shits.
nah. I'm just rolling with it, man. It is
You,
what it is.
you can roll away, my good friend. I'm going to
Get
just,
aggravated.
I'm just going to fucking, I'm going to seethe here in my own disdain.
But yeah, like you were saying, and I'm not saying that it's not the right way of doing things. I'm just saying, for me personally, it's not the tool that I would use to solve that problem. But I would use it to solve the problem of getting an athlete more generally physically prepared,
Mm.
which is training those general qualities specifically. For a powerlifter, I would be much more poignant and pointed in the approach that I take,
Yeah.
and it would be much more heavily geared towards how are we increasing absolute strength
Yeah. But again, I think
and
this is,
staying injury free and moving well enough to be able to express that when it matters.
yeah. I think this is obviously like coming back to like the objective that's sort of driving decisions is like, what's the specific adaptation that we're after? You know, if we are looking at building absolute strength, like our training has to reflect that. If our training is cool, we're doing general like preparedness for like these basic traits that we're looking at, and we're using that to sort of influence development within an athletic perspective. Like, what do we actually need to do in the gym to ensure that they can then go out into the field or onto the court or whatever arena they play in to do their sport better? And I think that's always an interesting thing to sort of look at. Is like, again, if I get a basketballer in, like I've some of the guys that on our team are like 6'6", 6'7". Like as far as basketball goes, like they're not fucking huge, but when you look at some of these guys that are 6'7" and they have a 7 foot plus wingspan, like if they're trying to do a heavy barbell bench, like how necessary is that? Like I don't think very.
No, I don't think at all.
No, like I
Yeah.
don't see how a big 1 RM bench press for a basketballer is applicable in any stretch of the imagination for their sport. Like and that's generally where like I don't place a huge emphasis on bench for a basketball. Like, sure, like I'll give them general, upper body training, but if it's going to be any pressing, it's like, cool, you're probably going to do a floor press. You're probably going to do some form of like assisted dips. You're probably going to do like landmine pressing and unilateral work to start training some just general principles that we're looking at in terms of overall development. But that's probably where we are going to look at, doing more plyometric work. We're going to look at a lot of change of direction work. We're going to look at doing a lot of jumping, a lot of speed work. Like those are the traits that we're going to have to look at training a little bit more specific to what is the outcome over here that we're trying to achieve with you being here. It's like, how do we bridge that gap? And I think that's where we kind of like need to remind ourselves from time and time again. Like if we're working with powerlifters, it's like, again, as you said, their objective is, the objective is problem solving the squat, bench, and deadlift so that we can apply it with that absolute strength and then having them remain injury free long enough to be able to expose that like expression of absolute strength.
Yeah, and what I do like, and what I can see a lot of use for and a lot of application for, that I think would can, well, I know can create really really positive outcomes for strength athletes and powerlifters, is using that conjugate method of training where you have the max effort, dynamic effort days,
Mm-hmm.
um, but specifically for raw lifters, not deviating too far away from the competition lifts, still having your max effort days and like your max effort upper, max effort lower, dynamic effort upper, dynamic effort lower, but understanding that the dynamic effort work that you're doing is the benefit that you're getting from that isn't necessarily that moving the bar dynamically is transferring over to your absolute strength, because if we know that force the dynamic effort work doesn't actually aid in the absolute strength work, what we can then kind of delineate from that is that you're just getting better at the skill of lifting the weight or the skill of the movement. So doing 6 sets of 3 at 60 to 70%, that's a really good opportunity to build a fuckload of skill within those patterns that can transfer over really nicely when you come back to do your absolute strength, your top end stuff, the max stuff, the heavy shit, above 80%, above 90% stuff.
Mm.
You've built a lot of competency within those movement patterns. So I can see the application of it and the benefit of it. I just think that the benefit of it isn't in the fact that you're moving the bar fast. It's the fact that you're getting a lot of reps in submaximally that's aiding in your skill.
Yeah. Like it's always quite interesting. Like when we do look at powerlifters, they obviously, for the most part, most powerlifters will be like, I want to lift as heavy as I possibly can. And if something's easy, like, oh, that was easy, can I go up? Now, I remember back in the dark times here in Victoria when I don't remember which number lockdown it was that we were in. But one of the clients that I had, he only had access to 180 kilos worth of weight. Now, his best deadlift was, I think, like 225 at the time. And so, like, I said to him, like, cool, like, we're just going to train and we're going to have different days where it's like, you might just do like 5 sets of 2, you might do like 3x3, you might do one AMRAP. And I'm like, you're obviously at home all day. You've got plenty of time up your sleeve, between squats, between deads, between bench. Like, we've got a lot of room to work here. And we trained really, really, really hard within the parameters of going, cool, like you're sub max to the point where you're capped at 180 as your total load that you can lift. To the point where, like, when things did reopen and he could go back into the gym, he was like, hey man, like, can I max out my deadlift tonight? I'm like, yeah, you can. Like, you've been training consistently for the last few months. Like, there's no reason like why we can't go in. I'm just gonna say, like, maybe cap it like an RPE 9. I don't want it to be like a full blown max out, but like just give it a bit of a whirl. And he went in and he pulled a 7.5 kilo PR, which had taken him like 15 months to get. And I think there's a lot of benefit within that example of you can have a lot of exposure to very submaximal weights, and you don't have to stress too much about going, well, I need to be redlining and pushing it as hard as I possibly can every single session. Like, there is a lot of validity in terms of going, I'm actually not going to gas myself out and burn myself out from trying to push and squeeze every kilo out of these things as possible, but about setting yourself up to go, hey, I can have exposure to, submaximal weight that the body's still going to have to respond to. I can have days where I'm going to focus on different qualities, and then that's going to yield a really nice outcome when the time comes to actually express that outcome.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard corner to turn in the brain as well, especially when you're coming off a comp prep, for example, where the goal is like everything is heavy, everything's top end, everything's moving more and more so in that direction every week, to then do the comp and to move into the next phase of training, which would predominantly be more of a restorative phase, into maybe like a general strength block or a hypertrophy block or a combination of both. And it's like, man, I had this conversation this morning with one of my guys, and shout out if he's listening. He'll definitely know it's him, because this conversation happened like 2 hours ago. But it was like, he sent me a video of his paused safety bar squats, and he was like, "Yeah, this was 5 kilos up from last week, but like I should have gone, I should have gone 10 kilos up. I'm really disappointed in this." I was like, "Wait, what? Why are you disappointed in this set? This set's beautiful." He was like, "Yeah, but I feel like I could have done 130." And I was like, "So fucking what? Do 130 next week." Like, this was a great set. You're in no rush to do 130. Like, what does 130 mean? It's just like, so what? Like, this was perfect. This is exactly what I wanted.
Mm.
So it's just reframing that mindset a little bit can be tough sometimes. I mean, like, fuck, I spoke an hour and a half ago about how hard it's been for me to take the focus off the bar, and that happens to almost every powerlifter after almost every prep. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you're used to going 95%, 96%, 98%, like week after week after week after week leading into your comp. And then it's like, oh, you mean it's okay for this not to feel like it's fucking making my brain explode? That's okay that it's not an RPE 11? You mean like, shouldn't this be harder? I'm like, no, dude, like, that's good. That was a true RPE 7. It was a really nice set. That's exactly what I wanted from this set.
Mm.
Go 130 next week.
I think that's a
It's
really
like,
interesting point to make, is like, not everything needs to be like an RPE 9 fucking high end percentages. Like, there can be times, and again, like, I've got a client of mine who will know that I'm talking about him, if he's listening, and it's like, if you go like a long period of time of prep after prep, and you're constantly pushing the envelope every single session, week in, week out, there will be a lot of benefit and a lot of value in actually having some blocks specifically designed around, this is not max effort. Like, we're purposely going to train you at light percentages. We're purposely going to train you at not max reps. Like, we're purposely going to pull back to allow all this back end recovery to facilitate, so that when we then do decide to put the foot down, the body's like, okay, well, we've actually had room to breathe, room to reset. Now we can hit the ground running, because we've actually given the body time to, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, dispense with probably some like severely built up fatigue that the body has accrued. Like, I kind of want people to get to a point where it's like, if you've been training really, really hard for a really long period of time, I want you to get to a point where it's like, I give you stuff that's manageable, to the point where you're like, hey man, like, can I get some heavier work in? Like, I'm ready. Like, I want you to be hungry for it. So when I do give it to you, like, okay, cool. Like, I asked for this, and now it's here. And yeah, fuck, I forgot how hard it is.
yeah, that time will come. And the, what you're saying is like, when we talk about powerlifting, is a powerlifting off season, quote unquote off season.
Mm.
That doesn't just mean dick to the wall in a different rep zone. like, like it's okay just to take the pedal off the gas for a little bit, because what that's actually going to do is it's going to create much more of a runway when the foot does go down and it's time to go again.
Yeah.
So it's like not every session. Well, I would even go as far as to say, if it is every single thing that you do every single day is an RPE 9 or 10, you're doing yourself a disservice. There
Yeah.
needs to be nuance in the way that your program looks, and the way that your load selection and intensity kind of moves through the session. Like if I look at my days at the moment, I have two things each day that are RPE 9. I have a couple of things that are an 8, and then everything else is a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that are a 9 change weekly.
Mm.
So like my safety bar squats today were a 7. Next, and my my overcoming isometrics, my yielding isometrics, my yielding split squat, front foot elevator isometrics were a 9. Next week, those might be flipped. The squats might be a 9 and the isometrics might be a 7. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like you can't do fucking 9 exercises in RPE 9.
Mm.
Like you just can't do it, because whatever you're doing in the back half of that session is you're not getting a quality work out of that. You're too fucked.
Mm. I think that's the thing that like a lot of people like. I mean, it's weird. Like in some ways, like you could do 9 exercises at an RPE 9 because the perception of the exertion, like it's like I'm trying really hard and it feels really hard, but relatively like it's probably not in the scheme of things. It's like it still technically falls under the banner of RPE 9, but it's like are
Yes.
we trying to get meaningful outcomes here? And if that's the case, not everything can be fucking redlining across the board, because we just don't have the capacity in the tank to do that week in week out and not expect something to give.
Yeah.
Like I know if I look at a lot of the programs that I write, like it's like, yeah, we have, the things that we're obviously trying to cause the most amount of adaptation in, that usually will get pushed harder. But
Mm-hmm.
then the things that are supportive of those things generally sit anywhere between like a 6 and an 8, because it's like, well, we're not trying to absolutely break you on these things. Like we're trying to facilitate adaptation, not force it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really key point to make. That shit, man, I missed the mark on that for so many years.
We all have.
Oh, like, dude, for like a big chunk of my training life, it was like, I if your arms are not hanging off your body, or if your quads are not failing as you're walking out of the gym, don't go.
Mm.
Like, yeah, don't go. And that was kind of instilled in me a little bit from the guys. I've told the story before about the guys that I very first started training with. Was the bunch of old school bodybuilders that used to train at 5:30, 6 a.m. at the gym that I went to. It's like that's what they did. It was like, we're just going to keep doing reps and sets until we can't move anymore. Then we're going to go vomit, and then we're going to have our protein shake, and then we're going to go home.
Mm.
So I was like, yeah, sick. This is how you train. Down. I hate myself. Let's do it.
Mm.
Um, I fucking, yeah, I hate myself enough to put myself through that. Let's go for it, dude. That's a big irk of mine. That's a big irk of mine.
What, training people so hard that they vomit, or
No. I one of my biggest irks. Notice how I say irk and not ick, because my biggest irk is when people say an ick. I fucking hate that. Let's leave that in 2023. But one of the thing that bothers me the most is when people say, I don't train because I hate my body. I train because I love my body. I train because I love myself. Ugh, yuck. Like, you need to hate yourself enough to really train. Like, get some results. Like, let's get some self-loathing in here. Like, you want to be an athlete? Like, hate yourself enough to be better. I feel like you would be on the love camp, wouldn't you?
Well, if I look back at my training and if I'm like, historically, when has my training been the best? I won't say necessarily the training has been the best, but my outcomes have been the best is when I've been like in like the breakup phase where I'm like driven by like rage and self-loathing. When like I'm happy, I'm like, yeah, like my training's good, but it's not great.
No, because you're like, oh, can't wait to go for a bushwalk. I'm going to cut this session 3 sets short so that I can get out and smell my pines.
But
Whereas like
like,
when there's nothing else and you're like, oh, I'm going home to an empty house and a microwave dinner. Like, I'm gonna if I don't stand up from this squat, like that would be a better outcome than even hitting the PR.
I'll give you a
Like,
good
that's when you
example.
see some. That's when you get strong.
Yeah, in like June, July last year, obviously not a great time in my world. Um, the pendulum squat that we have at Into was, oh, we had like a love hate relationship where I would go in there and I would load plates onto it, and I'm like last week I got 11 reps and I felt like I was going to die at rep 4, but I pushed to 11. It's like this week I'm going to push to 12 because there's something in very specifically that is fueling me with an undying amount of rage where I'm going to put a face to this, and I'm going to tell my mind that if I get rep 12 that I'm physically getting to punch that face, and I'm going to use all of the negative emotion that I have to drive a level of uh, outcome that I'm after that we can't chase with butterflies, rainbows, and sunshine. Like, we need gloomy, dark clouds, and we need fire and brimstone, and we need all the dark, negative shit to drive just some ungodly hard sets.
Yeah, and look, I'm gonna backtrack slightly and make the distinction between like I'm not talking about I'm just going to go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week and do a 45-minute session because my goal is, to just live a happier, healthier life. That's like, you can do that with sugar and spice and all things nice. Like, you can do that and love yourself, and like that's all good. But when I talk about training, like, obviously I live much more in the performance realm, and the people that I work with, they don't come to me because they want to lift their child up off the ground. They come to me because they want to be better in their sport. And if we look at almost an overwhelming percentage of top tier athletes in the world throughout history, they've got there through hardship.
Mm-hmm.
They probably haven't had the best upbringing. They've gone through some shit, and they've just figured out a way to work harder than everyone else because they just didn't want to stay where they were at, and training and competing was their way out. So they took all of that energy and they put it into the training and the competing, and the getting better, because that was their outlet. That was their way out.
Mm.
So if we're looking at, that extreme level of performance, I don't think you can go in there with sugar and spice and all things nice. Like, you have to go to places that it's like, dude, I'm not happy at the moment. Like, I'm not taking my headphones off, because if I take my headphones off right now, I'm probably gonna punch you in the fucking throat. I'm in the middle of a set. I'm telling myself that I'm a shit cunt, And if I don't do that, I'm probably not going to get through this set. So don't talk to me. I'm not happy.
Mm. It's an interesting balance to strike as well, because like I know for me, when like I was utilizing a lot of like quote unquote like negative energy to drive my sessions last year, like I can still push hard in my sessions, but I'm like the extent of how hard I can push, like I don't think there is enough hate to drive those sessions at the moment, which like in some ways is like a really positive thing. But it's like I also sometimes like still like to remind myself of being like there's some shit that got you to where you are now. Don't forget it, because the stuff that got you to where you are now, you like have you seen the movie Beer Fest?
Oh, I think I have, but I can't remember. The name really rings a bell.
So it was the guys that made Super Troopers, and they go to like a beer drinking championships, and one of the guys gets like punched in the face, and he has like a black eye, and that like drives him for training. And partway through their training, he's like, "Oh, like it's pretty much gone. Like I wish I had it to like remind me of why we're training and what we're trying to do here." And one of his friends like punches him in the face again, and he stands up, he's like, "Look," and he goes, "You're a good friend." And sometimes I think like having that reminder of some of the bad shit that has happened to you, as much as like we obviously don't want to go and relive it, I think sometimes there can be like some benefit of going like, you know, if I look back to some of the times that I've hurt myself, like I sure as shit don't want to go back to being injured, but like I'll remind myself of like, this is what happens when you don't look after yourself. You're sitting there saying you don't want to train. Well, tough shit. If you don't train, you end up back here, and that's not where we want to be. So I'm going to use that as like a bit of a driving force to continue pushing me where I do want to be, so that I don't go, oh well, I get relaxed about everything, and then all of a sudden like, oh, why are my back and my hips all fucked up and I can't move?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely context dependent. I mean, as is everything, right? Like,
Yeah,
I feel like we're kind of at the point where, we don't have to preface everything that we say by saying it is context dependent, because quite literally everything on the planet, everything that we talk about is going to have context to it and will be applicable in some situations and not applicable in other situations. But yeah, it's just something that irks me a little bit is when people are like, you shouldn't hate yourself. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm 38. I've hated myself since I was born, and I've turned out all right. Like, anything that's ever happened to me in my life has happened because I hated myself enough to just not give a fuck.
just one way to get there.
Yeah, it's not the only way, but yeah, it's definitely a
It's
way.
an avenue.
It's just definitely a avenue.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you have anything planned for the week, man? Do you have anything fun coming up?
Uh, yeah, so I've got my final week before the Novice Comp launches next week, which will be exciting. Obviously, got some basketball stuff this week as well. And then obviously just the standard go in, coach people, get them fucking outrageously strong, and then do the same for myself.
Cool.
Yeah. What about
You didn't
yourself?
train today, did you?
Nah, man. Mondays, like I've changed how I'm doing my check-ins now. So I used to do my check-ins on like a Sunday afternoon, so that everyone had their plan sort of like moving forward for the week. But obviously, because of how I mean, this is obviously the benefit of being self-employed, I can choose how I do things. So I've now given people the option of either starting their week with a check-in on a Monday or finishing their week with a check-in on Friday. And they're kind of like my designated check-in days. But as I always tell people, I'm like, if you've got like questions and concerns and queries throughout the week, like just message me. Like if I'm not obviously in a podcast, or if I'm not in a meeting, or if I'm not in a session, or I'm not training, like I will take the time to respond to your message on the spot. Um, Again, like we touch on this quite a lot. Like we don't want people potentially waiting a week before they can get any sort of feedback. Like I try and be as available as I can be Monday to Friday, pretty much from like 7 a.m. to like 7 p.m.
Yep.
And then obviously like on Sundays, I'm like, yeah, guys, like if I'm around and I happen to check my phone, like I might respond, but I'm probably also going to be off like doing stuff, because like I
Could be in the
do have a
bush,
life
man.
outside of coaching as well. And
Like, there's no
trying to
signal
withdraw.
getting
I'm like,
through
I
those
really
pine
want a
trees,
better.
man.
Nah, that's half the reason we go there, man. It's like the reception's terrible.
Yeah, I messaged you a bunch, and I was like, dude, this guy's somewhere in a fucking clay house. He's not getting any of this.
Yeah,
And
no,
you didn't. You didn't respond for days.
that's
I
because
felt
it.
so neglected.
Yeah, but I got to leave you like wanting a little bit more. It's that whole
Treat
like
a mean, Kevin Keen thing.
yeah, like a little bit of healthy
I
gaslight.
respond so well to that.
I know you do, but like a bit of healthy
Damn it.
gaslighting never hurt anyone.
Dude, I love being gaslit.
Oh, we love these technical glitches.
I just said I love being gaslit.
Yeah. When did you say that?
I must have been frozen.
No, you definitely didn't say that. I didn't hear it.
Oh, I love it.
oh,
I'm getting butterflies. It gets me riled up.
I know
Gets
it
me because
does.
this comes back to my problem solving addiction.
Yeah.
Because then like I automatically go into like, no, I definitely said it. Why didn't he hear me say it? Like, do I need to say it a different way? Do it it's a problem solving thing. That's why I love it.
Fantastic. I'm glad I know how to like really rile you up as well.
Dude, you know what's riling me up a lot at the moment?
Our internet.
You and Josh saying that you're going to fucking beat me at any of these combine tests. It it fucking boils my blood.
I know it
so
does. I
much.
fucking love it. I fucking love it.
I don't know why. Why am I so competitive?
Because you have a chip on your shoulder and you need to prove something to the greater good.
I don't have enough data points.
What's that?
Like, I don't have enough data points.
I know, but I do, and that's why we know I'm going to win.
Dude, when you say it, I know that you're joking. When Josh says it, and I know he's going to listen to this, so listen here, motherfucker. When you say that, my face gets hot.
But you know what you've just done?
I know he's going to do it every day now.
You've just given him so much ammunition to be like, anytime you post something, he's going to be like, yeah, but Ben's still going to beat you.
Oh, I know. Dude, it actually makes my face blush. Like, that's how it riles me up to I'm like, surely he doesn't think that. Surely, come on.
Well, I mean,
So yeah, it's
I guess we're really just going to have to
it's
wait
this
until
competitive thing, man. I don't know.
February.
Do you think? Do you think? Do you think people are born competitive, or do you think it's learnt behavior? And where do
I
you think it stems from?
ooh, me personally, I reckon it's a learned behavior. Um, I think it is a learned behavior. Oh, fuck, man, you're going to send me down a really big rabbit hole here, and this is where if the internet doesn't play ball, it's really going to piss me off. But I think inherently something that makes us human is our ego. And I believe that if, as children, we don't feel like we are getting the degrees of love and attention that we require to be developed into healthy, functioning adults, I believe we are inherently going to develop a level of competitiveness in order to try and achieve those levels of love and attention that we do need. But I think, ironically, as we develop those levels of competitiveness to achieve the things that we need to as children, and we maintain those as we develop into adults, I have a feeling, and again, I'm by no means a psychologist or a expert on the matter. This is just a intuition and gut feeling that I have. I feel like if we develop the level of competitiveness as children, I feel like as we develop into adults with that same level of competitiveness, it is going to potentially detract from those levels of attention and love that we so sought after as children. It will potentially push it away a little bit as adults.
How so? Because you're more focused on like a personal outcome.
a little bit, but I feel like to be competitive, you're going to strive to chase high level tasks, and I feel
Hmm.
like to look at achieving those high level things that people say that they quite often want. But I think the difference between people who can actually achieve those things and people who can't is I think there needs to be a high level of competitiveness. And I feel like to really embrace those levels of competitiveness, it's a very lonely path
Hmm.
because most people don't actually want, like they want the perception of that desired outcome, but to actually put in the level of work required to achieve that desired outcome, I don't think people actually want to do the work required to get there. And therefore I think a lot of the people that are inherently competitive to a really really high level, I think are inherently going to be a little bit lonely because there's not a whole
Hmm.
lot of people that, it's the whole thing of like, you know, you want to soar with eagles and not fuck around with turkeys. Like yeah, they're both birds, but like, do you want to hang around with turkeys or eagles? Like it's
Yeah, I'd rather fly with an eagle, but I'd rather eat a turkey.
fuck
I'd
yeah.
feel bad. I'd feel bad at eating an eagle.
I'll tell you what though,
It's so
like
majestic.
another fun little thing about when we went off on a little adventure a couple of weeks ago is we went up to like a little section of national park near Megan's place, and as we were driving along, there was like a dead eagle on the ground. Like it obviously been, well, not obviously, but I'm going to imagine it's probably been electrocuted on the power lines.
Hmm.
And like we drove past, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was a fucking eagle on the ground. Like we're pulling the fuck over so I can go and have a look. And it had died, but I'm like, I've obviously never been up close to an eagle like that hasn't been in like a zoo.
Was it huge?
Dude, it was massive. Like fuck,
Like
like
wingspan
the
bigger than
from
yours?
the very top of its head down to its talons was probably like 60 or 70 centimeters. And it's like the beak was like probably like longer than my fingers, but just
Oh,
like fucking like
big.
looking at the talons as well, like the actual like nails on the talons. I'm like, fuck me, man. Like it makes sense when you see an eagle that close up as to like how much it can just like tear shit to shreds.
Yeah, they do damage.
Yeah, but I'm like, again, you don't really see eagles very close often.
No,
So to
man.
actually see one as sad as it was that it was dead, and there was part of them like, it's dead. Like I would love to like it was almost in condition where I'm like, I feel like I could have taken
Don't
it to
say,
like
don't say what I think you're going to say.
what?
Were you going to pick it up and like stuff it?
Well, I'm like, it'd be fucking cool to have it like taxidermied because of how the condition
Dude,
was.
you're such a hobo.
Dude,
Oh my god.
you say this like you don't know that already.
I know, but it's like every time it's just like something new comes out that just like further reaffirms it. It's like
But see,
that flannel's not for show. Like
but
you
see,
were born in that.
yeah, no shit. But this is the thing,
It's
like,
like it's like you look at hipsters and you're like, you merely adopted the flannel. I was born in the flannel.
like for me though, like for example, like when we drove out to Dallas, like we saw heaps of foxes. If I saw like a dead fox on the side of the road, I'd be like, like I would never be like, I'm gonna get that taxi. I'm like, it's a fox. Like who gives a shit? But I feel like seeing a dead eagle,
Foxes?
yeah.
Foxes give a shit, bro.
Oh
Come
no,
on.
they do. But as in
Don't
like,
you love nature?
I do. But I'm like, I don't feel like a fox has the same status as like a big fuck off eagle. So I feel like seeing an
You're a
eagle,
status hunter.
yeah, like I, you know, never really been like much of a person to give a fuck about like trophy hunting, but I feel like if you were into something like trophy hunting and you're like, I literally have the opportunity to get something that is like the, you know, the alpha of that sort of domain. I'm like, I feel like the Eagles rule the skies, and the
Yeah,
fact that
man.
it's like you have
Other
the,
than the pterodactyls, but they're up there for sure.
but that's the thing is like pterodactyls never look up. So if you go higher than the pterodactyls, you can get yourself one.
Touche.
Yeah.
If we come back to competitiveness really quick,
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know if it's born or bred. Um, or learned behavior. But what I do know is that I think it has a compounding effect when say we become competitive about something, and then we throw ourselves into that endeavor wholeheartedly because we don't want to lose and we want to be the one that wins and we want to get that positive feedback. And then we do well, we get that positive feedback loop, and then it becomes this thing where it's like, okay, well, I went 100% in on this thing and I got a really positive result and everyone praised me and I felt really good about it. And I hated myself a little bit less for like 5 seconds when everyone was saying good job. And then it's like, okay, now that like dark hole is back, what else can I throw myself into to get that positive reinforcement and get that praise from people? It's like, I think that it kind of breeds upon itself, where it's like every opportunity that we then get to express and throw ourselves into something with the possibility of a positive outcome at the end, it perpetuates over and over again.
Mm.
I think.
I mean, it'd be curious to see if we do have any listeners who are in a field that would have any sort of insight as to whether it is something we are born with or whether it's something that we develop over time. I might actually put that up as like a little poll thing on my Instagram tonight and just sort of see what the people think and whether again we have anyone in that audience that might go, oh well, actually, this is something that shows it's this and not that.
Yeah, it's an extra chromosome. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's the tism.
It's a competitive zone, a competitive chromosome that makes you just want to win at everything at all costs. Like, dude, you should see me in the bedroom. I win every time. I'm like so fast.
You always come first.
Always, man. It's like
Always.
a race, and I'm so competitive. I'm not gonna let him win that. Are you serious?
What's your fastest time?
Wait, dude, I'm running sub tens.
Nice.
Like, you can call me Usain Bolt if you like.
Finishes in under 10 seconds.
Yeah, dude, I'm running Olympic times here.
I wonder if he'll ever break the 9 seconds.
Potentially. It's up to, yeah, I don't think that's beyond reproach.
The funny part for me is like there was obviously like a little bit of a freeze there for me, but it was like we literally went about talking about developing or being born with competitiveness into it sort of catching back up, and you talking about being the person to come in under 9 seconds, and I'm like, wow, that was a very interesting change of pace, quite literally, so to speak.
Yeah, we're a podcast for the people. You never know where it's going to go.
So good.
Dude, we came into this today with absolutely zero plan. I sat down in this chair after walking in the house, honestly, like 3 minutes prior to pressing record. We had no plan. We had no direction. And I feel like somehow, by the grace of God, we have coherently put together 2.5 hours almost of somewhat useful information around problem solving, training periodization, mindset, strength and conditioning versus powerlifting, force velocity curve, max dynamic repeated effort, GPP, basketball, bench pressing, and God knows what else. There was a lot there.
I don't know if that speaks to like our depth of knowledge or just our ability to talk absolute fucking nonsense for far too long. But either way, I think we've done a fucking fantastic job, regardless of whether it is a good display of our knowledge or just our ability to talk fucking bullshit for Yeah, way too long. Like, imagine if we were drunk. Like, if we'd had like a couple of wines or like a couple of whiskeys, fucking, it'd be wild.
Yeah, it would be a sight to see, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Or listen to.
Mm,
Yeah, it'd be a sight to see.
yeah.
I'm going to call it there.
Yeah. I was going to say,
Um,
like, the tech issues are starting to really fucking unravel me. And I'm like, I want to fucking headbutt the wall.
yeah, I got to have my post workout meal, dude. Like I've completely missed my anabolic window, which
I can,
clearly means,
I can see you shrinking by the second.
yeah, I mean that workout was useless because I didn't eat protein within 10 seconds of completing it.
So,
So I mean, I
so
don't even know
that,
what I'm going to do now, but
well, I know what
try
you're
and do
going to do. You
something.
have to go back to the gym. You've got to repeat the session, but you've got to red line everything and gaslight yourself into like RPE 15s.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm going to do? Is I might just go like hit a quick set of push ups and then eat straight afterwards. So I can be like, no, no, no. The workout wasn't done. It was just an intermission.
It was a really
And now
long
I'm,
rest break.
yeah, and now I'm having my post workout meal. So it's still within the anabolic window. Grow, Nick. You deserve it.
I,
That's what I'm going to do.
I think that's a fucking great option.
And if that isn't meathead math, I don't know what is.
Math head meat.